everyone. Today we're going to be learning about the Olympics. As you probably know, the Olympics is still occurring today. Every 2 years we have our Winter Olympics and we have our Summer Olympics, and it keeps rotating. But how many of you actually really know the history of the Olympics? So today we're going to actually learn about that. So the beginning of the Olympic legacy. So what is it? How does it begin? So the Greeks are united in three main ways. They're united with their language, their religion, so their polytheistic religion, and they're united with the Olympic Games. Now, the Games originally began in 776. This is the first recorded Olympic Games. This is the time of writing. It's beginning known as the first Olympiad. The Greeks use this as their calendar, marking the beginning from this is when we started this sport, which really showcases how important sport was to them at the time. And the 776 BC Games were in honor of the god Zeus, who is the main and most important god to the Greeks. They had four famous games called Olympia in honor of Zeus, Delphi in honor of Apollo, Nemea in honor of Zeus, and Isthmia in honor of Poseidon. And the Olympia and the Delphi games are held every 4 years, whereas the Nemea and the Isthmia games are held every 2. And as I said, these games, although they're about sports, were always in honor of a god. So an Olympiad is one of the ways the Greeks measure time. It was used as a starting point at like a year 1 of the cycle. So year 1 would be the Olympic Games, year 2 Nemean Isthmian Games, year 3 Pythian Games, year 4 Nemean Isthmian Games. And the idea here was that it was done so that the individuals could participate in all the games. So they weren't ever happening at the same time. This map shows you the location of where everything is. Olympia being here, Corinth, Isthmia are closer to each other. Here's Athens, and Delphi is further north. So what do we know and how do we know about the games? Well, we know about them through literature, through Homer's Iliad book and the Odyssey. We know through archaeology. So some of the stadium still remains. We know through the art, through pottery and vases. And we know it through inscriptions about who won and who lost and what their prizes were. And we know it through coins because, when you win something, oftentimes your face is put on a coin. Who were the most successful? Well, obviously the Spartans were. For the longest time they were, because they were the ones that were constantly training. They were constantly working out, if you will, okay? And sport was a major part of their education. So over 50% of those that won were from Sparta. And even females took part in this education in Sparta because they were more equal than the Athenian women were in their cult, in their society. But after 600 BC, they were not always the victor because the other city-states decided to wake up and say, hey, you know what? We should become good at this too. Why should they always be the one winning? Let's invest in some of our own athletes. And that's what they do. Again, not unlike today. Some of the more important people and events at the time, Solon was an important social reformer. He was the one who gave rewards to the athletes, the victors. Persidas was a tyrant who founded the famous local festival in Athens. The Constitution of Athens was important as an event. The democracy was in danger due to the Persian Wars. And one of the biggest battles was at Marathon. And when Athens won, there was a story of a man that ran the distance of a common day marathon all the way to Athens to tell about the victory. And so this idea of having a marathon, even today, the distance of the marathon is the distance that this man ran to go tell them of the victory of Athens against the Persians. And another person was Pericles. He tried to make Athens the cultural center hub of Greece in terms of literature and arts, but also in that literature and art, they also referred to sports an awful lot, and dramas were made about it as well. So why participate? Well, immortality is huge for the people at this time, right? You're competing for immortality. The gods know and love you. You get, written about. You get the rewards. You're the one who's put down in history for having won. It's also important about training the body and mind. It was good for military purposes, especially for Sparta. And they were also for religious purposes because they were in honor of the gods. Each stadium had a temple to Zeus, and the other ones, they also have a temple to another god, but they always had to have a temple to Zeus. And then the rewards were whatever that god loved. So the olive tree, the olive crowns were made for the victors, especially if that game was in honor of Zeus. The grounds are considered sacred grounds as well. How did the games spread? Well, as land is conquered, the Greek land spread too. So does the idea of competition. So if you conquer more and more land, for example, Alexander the Great, he builds his empire all the way. He brings this idea to all of these different places, right? Even when the Greek empire kind of fell and the Romans took over, they adopted some of this culture too, right? Now, Alexander the Great did not participate in the games, but his dad, Philip II, did participate in the games. And he was victorious, but he was not the only leader to participate in the games. The Iliad makes note and reference to a bunch of activities that are performed at the Olympic Games. Games were held at a funeral of a dead hero initially, and the prizes were given out to divide the hero's possession. So they had activities like the chariot race, which was a very important race for nobility. He mentions it the most. Homer mentions this the most. There's boxing, wrestling, the pentathlon. If you won the pentathlon, you were considered to be the best athlete of the games. There was also the foot race, armed combat, archery, and javelin. Now, his book, The Odyssey, was the sequel to the Iliad, and it was written after the Trojan War. This time, instead of the games being held for a funeral, it's held at a banquet. And there's also no prizes here. But now we have the game for the sake of games, like we enjoy it for the sake of the sport. And the 5 events listed are running, wrestling, boxing, discus, and jumping. How did the Greeks play this game? Believe it or not, they were naked. The spectators didn't have to be initially, but if you were a female, you could watch if you were single, unmarried, but you'd have to expose one breast, okay? Now, in terms of seating, the facility was like a modern day stadium, but they didn't have, some of them did not have seats. It was like shaped like a modern day stadium, but with no seats. They used the grass, and they used the hills of the grass to be like the stepping up of the seats. And the stadiums were in honor of Demeter, which is the goddess of agriculture. And since there were every 4 years, there was no need. At the height of Olympia, there were 40,000 spectators. But if you went to Delphi, there actually were seats in the hills. So the spectators were men. Women could participate. They were virgins, single, not married. They had to expose their breasts, as I said. But if you were married, you were not allowed to watch. You would be killed if you did. Only the priestess of the governor was allowed to, as a married woman, was allowed to watch. There was one situation in 404 BCE where a married female went in to watch her son, and she acted as the trainer. So she disguised herself as a trainer, and she was discovered. And then after this, judges required even all the trainers to be naked so that they could make sure that there weren't any married women there. The prizes went along with, again, with whatever god the Olympic game was for. So in Olympia was for Zeus, so you had the olive crown. Delphi was for Apollo, so you had the laurel crown. Isthmia was pine crown, and Nemea was a celery crown. And, you know, again, this was all about prestige and religious significance. But if you were from a wealthy city, there was nothing stopping the city from giving you more prizes and more wealth, right? If you were not from a wealthy city, then you just got, like, you know, the knowledge that you were the winner. So Olympia was the more popular game of all of them because it was not a city, state, or town. It was a place where people went to worship. So it was famous because there wasn't exactly more rivalries. There was no town politics, right? So this is why it was more popular than the other ones. So as I mentioned, the Romans come in, right? So after Alexander the Great is done, he dies, Rome becomes a superpower, and then eventually Greece becomes a province of Rome. But the culture still emanates, and the culture and the showing of the games still happens. And there are many different Roman emperors that want to participate in the games too, and to show their prestige, especially Nero. But eventually the games do come to an end because Theodosius I in 393 decides that the games are not Christian. And, because they're in honor of different gods, and the Christians don't believe in multiple gods, right? So, he says that's it. They're done. But evidence suggests it might have continued for a little while longer. Other people say, there are earthquakes, and then at the fall of Rome in 476, they're starting to lose. They don't have money. So, they don't have the money to continue these games. That might be part of it. the attacks of the Visigoths and stuff coming into Rome might have also been part of that too. So there are many different reasons why they might have come to an end.